So thank you very much. I'm going to mute all of you. Please write to me in the chat box. There will be moments in the tour that I'll stop several times so I can take your questions. I live in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem experiences the holidays in an amazing way, both like the Jewish one, the whole Jewish holidays, Christians and Muslim holidays alike. I live very close to one of the Muslim neighborhoods and keep hearing the muezzin, the call for prayer, and some of the sermons that are held. And I speak Arabic. It's difficult to hear from the speaker, but to understand from the speakers. But yeah, I mean, I'm really involved in all three Abrahamic religion, and that's what we will try to cover visiting the Temple Mount. So I have to start with an aesthetic issue, my beard. So we're not running out of blades here in Israel. It's simply has, I grow my beard now in these days between Passover and the Jewish Pentecost, okay? Now we count 50 days, the counting of the Omer until the days of harvest, till the wheat. So the Jewish Pentecost is called Shavuot, has a different content. You can read about it in the Old Testament. But why do I grow my beard and don't shave it and don't cut my hair? The reason is in the 33rd days from Passover until another celebration that we have, we mourn. Historically, we mourn for the last almost 1900 years for a plague that happened in Judea in the 2nd century BC. Now, this is not a plague of virus or anything like that. It's a plague in the sense that many people died. To be exact, 24,000 of the yeshiva students of Rabbi Akiva. Now, for those of you who are Jewish, Rabbi Akiva is mentioned in the Haggadah, and I want to add this, and you'll see how it connects to other things, other elements of our tour. Rabbi Akiva, it says in the Haggadah, was hosting other rabbis in his underground shelter. How do we know it's an underground shelter? Because it says that they didn't saw the light, and their students came in and told them, okay, it's done, and we have to say the prayer now. So what 5 prominent rabbis, I would say, did in an underground shelter, and according to the Haggadah, the little book that we read during Passover, what were they doing in a shelter? And they were speaking, according to the Haggadah, about the Exodus. Okay, so the Exodus is an amazing story, but speaking about the Exodus all night, what exactly is the meaning of this short little story in the Haggadah, as I said? They were planning the second Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire. So how do we know that? We have other rabbis that taught us that, but basically they were preparing for new salvation, for a new Exodus. This time not from the hands of Pharaoh, but actually from the hands of the Roman Empire. In the last meeting, I mentioned in the first station of the Via Dolorosa that one of the reasons the Jews rejected Jesus was because he was supposed to be a king, but where is your sword? We are looking for a Messiah that actually holds sword and engage in battles and supposed to deliver the children of Israel, not spiritually, not to save the souls, but to save the bodies and to save the actual people from the political sovereignty of the Roman Empire. So this is one super important difference that we have in the concept of the Messiah between Judaism and Christianity. The second thing is the scale of the revolt. In the last time I just mentioned it, that the temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 AD. This time I'm not talking about the 1st century, I'm talking about the 2nd century CE or AD. I'm talking about the second Jewish revolt of the Jews against the Roman Empire. It's known by scholars today as the revolt that shook the Roman Empire. It was the worst rebellion the Roman Empire ever faced. I'm talking about 10 to 11 legions that were sent to Judea to oppress this revolt out of 30. The Roman Empire had 30 legions. They had to send not 4 like in the first revolt, they had to send 11 legions to oppress this revolt. So this is known in the Jewish tradition as the Bar Kokhba revolt. During this revolt, 24,000 of the students of Rabbi Akiva died, meaning they were participating in the in this revolt. And altogether, and this is very reliable sources, 600,000 Jews were killed. I'm talking about 40% of the Jewish population in Judea. We're talking about the Holocaust week. Lisa mentioned that. The Holocaust, Memorial Day coming up tomorrow. This was an actual Holocaust in Judea happening 1800 years ago. And we commemorate that as well. That's why I don't shave my beard. We will see how it all connects again with the ending of our session. Okay, that's the introduction. The time that we are in is very intense. Okay, we have religious holidays combined with national holidays, and the Independence Day, the Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers, and others. So my plan now is to show you a bunch of pictures just to get you understand the exact location that we're talking about. This picture, some of you have seen, I think last week, is from the Western Wall, right over here. Jews pray 3 times a day, not to the wall. The wall is very nice, but this is not our direction of prayer. We actually pray to the foundation stone, which is inside the Golden Dome, which is a very known landmark clearly in Jerusalem. I see that more people are joining us, which is fantastic. Okay, so we actually pray here to the foundation stone, which is inside the Golden Dome. I want to show you another picture, getting closer to it. Okay, it's an amazing building. The original building is from 1400 years ago, built by the Muslims. There were several renovations taking place over there. And it has beautiful blue and green and yellow tiles from the days of the Turks. The golden top, actually, the plates is not as ancient. It's from the 1960s, actually. But the marble, all of that is hundreds of years old. So this is the original building. It never collapsed. Since the 7th century, it never collapsed. This is an original Muslim shrine with some renovations, as I said. Okay, this is, as I said, the location of the temple. This were the, as I was pointing out, the place of the foundation stone. Let me just get another picture of the foundation stone. There you go. Now I'm going to totally move from it. If you look to the top, you'll see that there's a lot of gold going on. There is a nice arcade, and in the very bottom, there is a rock. If some of you has their phones, I hope you can still see that, but there is an actual rock, an actual stone. It's the bedrock of Mount Moriah. Okay, so this is the top of Mount Moriah. Okay, the foundation stone, the top of Mount Moriah. This is what you see inside. Since 2002, the Second Intifada, the uprising of the Palestinians, non-Muslims are not allowed to visit and to go inside the Golden Dome and to Al-Aqsa Mosque that we're going to see in a moment. They used to sell tickets between 1967 until 2000, 2002, somewhere over there. They used to sell tickets to enter the Islamic Museum, the mosques, and they stopped it because of the Intifada for political reasons, and they never renewed it, although it's been almost 20 years since then. Okay, now that we saw the place that we are going to talk about, I want to show you, I want to share my screen actually, and to show you a funny meme that I think you'll find entertaining. Just 1 second. And oh, guys, I just want to tell you that people are still participating. So if I stop every now and then, it's simply because I don't want people to wait. Okay, take a look at my screen right now. It's in Hebrew, but you can see Adam looking at the apple, the fruit of knowledge, and it says in Hebrew, just one, what could possibly happen? And then you see the Chinese fellow looking at the bat, just one, what could possibly happen? So just to entertain you guys. So that's what I want to show you. But this is again the location of. Thank you, Jenny. I get very little response here. Very good. So I said the foundation stone, and the foundation stone is the place where the creation has started. Okay, the beginning of creation, the 6 days of creation, 1 day of rest. It's starting in this location. Okay, if we need a geography to where God started to create the world, that's the place. He starts to create the world on the first Sunday, and then when he gets to Friday, he creates the animals, and towards the end of towards the afternoon, he takes a little bit of dirt from the foundation stone that I showed you to create Adam. In Hebrew, the word Adam comes from dirt. It means dirt. Adama in Hebrew means dirt. So Adam is the one that is made of dirt. All the names in the Bible, all the names in Hebrew, besides probably my name, has some meaning. Okay, it's not just random names. You can also see Eve over here in this little caricature, and she says in Hebrew, I saw that there is a sale in Zara. So that's the style they had back then. Anyway, that's Eve. Eve in Hebrew, we don't say Eve, we say Chava, Chava. And Chava comes from a word that you may be familiar, even if you're not Jewish, Chai or Lechaim, Lechaim. Okay, Lechaim is our cheers, okay, to life, okay? So Chava is the mother of all living, and she is, as we know, the mother of all of mankind. Okay, so this is the beginning of it. Now, as we know, Adam and Eve messed up very quickly in the Garden of Eden, and although they sacrificed some animals to God to be thankful for creating them, right in the next day, the first Shabbat, the first Sabbath, they already were sacrificing animals, again, to show their how thankful they are for God. They messed up. They ate from the forbidden fruit, the fruit of knowledge. Okay. Now there is a slight difference between the Jewish understanding of this sin to the Christian one. The Christians see that as the original sin, the sin of disobedience. In Judaism, we think that they were supposed to eat from the fruit of knowledge, but only after they ate from the fruit of life. Okay. They were supposed to eat from the fruit of life that represents not just long life, but represents morality. And after they embrace the moral code, the moral behavior, then they can be knowledgeable. As we all know, definitely from the 20th century, people were very, very smart, but they used their wisdom not to do good, but to do horrible things like the First World War, the Second World War, and all the other crazy ideologies of the 20th century that I don't know how many tens of millions or probably more were, died as a result of that. So knowledge is not enough. Morality, that's the important part. So this is, again, the sin according to the Jewish tradition. The sin was not to eat from the fruit of knowledge, but they were supposed to eat, as I said, from the fruit of life first. Okay. The next thing I want to show you is what happened after that, okay? As we know, Adam and Eve sinned. They were expelled from heaven. They had two curses. Adam was supposed to sweat for his bread, basically to pay taxes. And Eve her punishment was that she will give birth in great pain or great sorrow. So this is the kind of punishment that we all deal in this way or the other, paying taxes and raising our kids. Definitely in the younger kids in the days of Corona, it's a bit more challenging if you have younger ones. But as we all know, they wanted still some connection to God. They sinned, but they wanted this connection to God, and I'm going to talk about it in a moment. But they still messing up. Cain killed Hebel. The first 10 generations were all sinners, So God said enough is enough, and he decided to push the restart button with the great flood. Take a look at this. You can see Noah right over here. He's drinking something and his ark. Okay, so he brings the great flood. He saved one righteous man, that's Noah, and he saves a pair from every animal, 7 pairs from the kosher animals. We understand why in a second. And he brings the great flood. Everyone dies, basically. Only Noah and his family are saved. Once the great flood was over, about a year later, the Ark of the Covenant, according to the tradition, lands on the same foundation stone that I showed you earlier. It lands over there, Noah and his family stepping out of the ark and rebuild the same altar that was originally built by Adam. Okay, so we have Adam building an altar. Then Noah built the same altar in the same place on Mount Moriah to give sacrifice. Now, the word for sacrifice in Hebrew is korban. Korban, that's how we say the word sacrifice. It comes from the word getting closer, karov. Karov, or it means to get closer, and korban is to get closer to God. That's the whole purpose of the sacrifices. Now, I know it sounds pretty brutal, especially in the book of Leviticus, but in other books it's mentioned the sacrifices. Okay, slaying all these animals for what? Okay, it sounds like definitely for a vegan, vegetarian. I have to say God, or at least the biblical God, is not a vegetarian, but he's not eating any of these sacrifices, okay? This is simply a way to express the will of mankind, the will to get closer, to bridge the gap between them and God. So this is the original purpose of the sacrifices, even before the sin even happened, okay? Let's continue. As we know, the sin continued, the Tower of Babel, etc. And God ultimately says, okay, I have to find one righteous man. I promise not to kill mankind again, but I have to find one righteous man that maybe will bridge the gap. Through him, I could bridge the gap between me and my creation. This man was Abraham. Abraham. Take a look at this. Here is Abraham. This is the binding of Isaac, and you can see again the altar on Mount Moriah. So Abraham was taken through a series of tests of devotion to God, leave his homeland in Iraq, then leave his father's house in Haran, then famine, he has to go down to Egypt, then his wife is barren until the age of 90, and lots of troubles. And then once finally, when he was 100 years old, he had Isaac. Then God tells him, okay, slay your son to me, sacrifice your son to me. Where? In the place that I'll show you. That's the land of Moriah, Mount Moriah. He takes him, he built the same altar that was originally built by Adam and later by Noah, generations earlier. And in this location, he's about to kill his own son, to sacrifice, to show his complete devotion to God. In the last moment, as we know, the angel stops him and tells him, you don't have to kill Isaac. Don't send your hand, don't stretch your hand to him. You can kill the ram of Isaac instead. So this is the one that was entangled in the bush. You can see him on the other side. And Abraham kills him, slay him instead. So these are the first important traditions that I am pointing out. There's another tradition that Jacob, when he fled from Esau, his brother that wanted to kill him, he also slept in Mount Moriah, and the ladder of Jacob was also over there on Mount Moriah. So the 12 stones that he gathered, okay, that's the altar basically. So this is in the Bible, it's called, in the book of Genesis, it's called Bethel. But Jewish tradition points out Bethel. In Hebrew, it means the house of God. It refers to Jerusalem and not to an actual place called Bethel that we have in Israel. Okay, let me see if we can do a little stop. Yes, let's do a little stop for questions. I don't see actually any questions. Yeah, okay. If you want to write questions, write to me. Don't worry, I'll get back to that as we go. Let's continue. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they live in the Holy Land. Joseph was sold he was sold to slavery in Egypt. He became the hand of Pharaoh, and then towards the end of the life of Jacob, he also goes down to Egypt and lives there in the land of Goshen. And for the next 400 years, some suggest that it's 200 years, that doesn't really matter. For centuries, they lived in Egypt, ultimately were enslaved by Pharaoh. In the days of Moses, he saves them from slavery. And after 40 years in the desert, they cross the Jordan River. Now, take a look at this picture. What you see here is the Jordan River. Maybe some of you have been there. If you haven't been there, no worries. When you will be in Israel, you will definitely go there. If you will be with me, there is no chance that you won't be there, okay? Because I have to take you there. This is the place where the children of Israel, the 12 tribes, crossed the Jordan River. And about 2,300 years later, Jesus will be baptized here by his cousin John. Yes, Qasr el-Yahud, correct. So that's how it's called in Arabic, Qasr el-Yahud. El-Yahud means the Jews. Qasr means the place of breaking, the place of cutting. Some suggested the palace, or like there probably was some monument over there. So this is where the Arabic name, even the Arabic kind of preserves the ancient connection to the Jews. So maybe some of you have been to the Jordan River near the Sea of Galilee, but I'll just tell you that this is the original place. How do we know? Because this is just next to Jericho. So if it happened in this location, or maybe 100 meters to the north or to the south, there's a minefield there. So I don't want you to go there. Okay, there is a minefield because of the because it was a war zone between Israel and the Palestinian militias based in Jordan for many years. So don't try to find the actual crossing point or anything. That's the closest we have, and this is good enough. Anyway, the tribes of Israel crossed the Jordan River over here and celebrated the Passover, the first Passover in the land of Israel near Jericho. Hundreds of years will continue, and there is still no temple, okay? There is no temple yet. There is the tent of meeting, the Mishkan, or the tent of meeting. And it will not be based in Jerusalem even. It will be in a place called Gilgal, later in Shiloh, later in Kiryat Yearim. There's like a bunch of places where the tent of meeting will be until the days of King David, that will rebuild the altar. And his son Solomon, there we go. You can see it right here. This is the temple built by Solomon, but the altar was built by David. Maybe you can see it on the other in one corner. I'm in one corner and the altar is in the other one. So this is the altar. When in every church there is an altar, but the original, it refers to the original altar here in the temple in Jerusalem. The same altar that was built originally by Adam, later by Noah, later by Abraham, later by David, and that's the altar. What you see over there, again, for sacrifice, to connect between God and his creation. Okay, I see there is a little bit of a chat. Very good. Okay, very good. Let's continue. So this is the first Solomonian temple destroyed by the Babylonians. I want to show you now the second temple. Now, long story short, there are 3 second temples. The first one was built by the returnees from Babylon. The second one was built by the Maccabees, the Jewish priests that revolt against the Greek Empire, kicked them out. That's basically the story of Hanukkah. And the third second temple, built by King Herod in the 1st century BC. Okay, let's take a look. What you see here is the temple, gigantic building. I'm talking about 50 meters tall, about 150 feet tall. You can see the altar next to it. And I want to show you in this picture the hierarchy of the Jews. It has basically 3 levels, okay? So the most important ones are the ones in the middle, dressed up in white. You can see them dressed up in white. These are the priests. In Hebrew, we say Kohen. Kohen means priest. So that's Leonard Cohen, Cohen brothers. Okay, these guys are all originally from the family of the priests. I'm talking about the tribe of Levi, okay, or the Levites. And amongst the tribe of Levi, there was the family of Aaron, the high priest, and all his descendants are basically from the priesthood family, such is my father-in-law, for example, and my great-grandfather. They were also Kohens. And so this is in the top of the hierarchy. And one side of the screen, I'm not sure on which side, because for some reason there's some kind of a mirror effect to the Zoom. I have no idea why. But in one side of the screen, you're supposed to see people with trumpets. These are the Levites dressed up in blue. I'm sure you will see them. These are the Levi's. So you know of Levi's jeans, okay, Levi Strauss, but that's the name, okay, Levi's. Before they had the jeans factory, they were here playing music in the temple. So this is what you see over here, okay? Beside of playing the music in the temple and singing psalms, the songs of King David, they were also in charge of keeping the gates of the temple and washing the feet and helping with all kinds of logistics to the priesthood families. So that's what you see over there. So we have priests and we have Levites. The last ones are the common people, the Israelites, okay? The Israelites are on the other side of the screen. Again, I'm not sure on which side. I can maybe point them out. They are more or less over here. So you can imagine the common Israelites from the 12 tribes coming to the temple at least 3 times a year to celebrate the different holidays. Okay, let's see what we have in the chat box. Okay, about the Garden of Eden. Yes, you got me there. This is Terry sending us. The Garden of Eden was near Tigris and Euphrates River. Also, didn't the Ark rest on Mount Ararat, which is in Turkey? Okay, so first things first. Jewish tradition locates the Garden of Eden in a few different places, depends on which source you read. Which is not uncommon to have multiple opinions in Judaism, right? The Talmud is full of that. But the idea is that we don't really know. Yes, the Garden of Eden sounds like it's in Iraq, but maybe back in these days, these rivers stretch from Jerusalem to Iraq. So anyway, I'm not trying to be too scientific about it. That's the tradition anyway. About the Mount Ararat, correct. Mount Ararat are in Armenia, yes, not in Turkey, but in Armenia, but Eastern Turkey, let's say, the eastern side of Asia Minor. But this is the tradition. So the tradition points out Mount Ararat as Mount Moriah, okay? So that's, again, something that I don't bother to question, not because it's not interesting, but simply because I'm trying to give you the perception of the Jewish perception of this place, okay? That's all. Let's continue. How could they use the foundation stone in Jerusalem to worship? Okay. I just remind the foundation stone is not just a random stone. It's the top of a mountain, actually. Okay. So when I show you the picture of the stone, you have to understand it's attached to the actual heel. Okay. If we dig down in the surface over there, then you'll see the entire mountain. Okay, so that's, I hope I answered all of your questions. Okay, very good. Very good questions too. Let's see if I have it. Yeah, no, that's fine. The pilgrimage. And then we are getting to, finally, to Jesus. Okay, there you go. Oh. Yes, thank you, Rodriguez. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm showing you George, yes. Thank you, George. So I'm showing you the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. I'll move out of the way. This is from, if you've been to Jerusalem, you've seen this in the Jewish Quarter. You can see on one corner, a modern child dressed up with a baseball hat, red baseball hat, red baseball hat and a green bag. He's a modern child stepping into the past and greeted by this sweet girl, hands him a pomegranate. And next to the girl, you can see, just above her, you can see her father carrying a lamb, and just behind him, probably her brother carrying another lamb to the temple. So this is the pilgrimage mentioned in multiple times in the Torah about showing yourself in the temple 3 times a year, in Passover, the Pentecost, Shavuot, it's in Hebrew called, and the Feast of Tabernacles. I'm talking about Sukkot, of course. So these are the 3 high holidays. You're supposed to show yourself, and in every holiday there was a significant sacrifice. So on Passover, you sacrifice the lamb, and the altar is, in a way, kind of a 2-way street. You give a little bit of your own, okay, from the first borns of your livestock, and in return, God will give you plenty. God will give you abundance. So if we'll see this 2-way street over here, I'm trying to, let's go back to this, sorry, this one, okay? You give a little bit of your own on the altar, you sacrifice something on the altar, God smells that, and he will give you abundance from the temple, from the foundation stone. This is the dwelling place of God on earth. So in a way, that's the 2-way street, I would say, between heaven and earth. You show your will to connect to God, and he shows his will to connect to you, okay? So it's not bribery or anything. This is simply act of love between mankind and their creator, and between the creator to his creation, okay? Let's continue. We saw the pilgrimage. I want to talk about the child. Take a look at this child over here. Again, behind the father that holds the lamb. I think this is Joseph and Jesus, okay? And I'll tell you why. So let's talk about Jesus in the temple. Now that we understood many of the traditions in regard to the temple, Jesus is visiting the temple multiple times, okay? From the day he is a little baby. So if we'll open the gospel by Luke, we can see that he had a bris, he had the circumcision on the 8th day, and then Jesus is presented in the temple, okay? And it says, I'm reading from Luke, 2nd chapter, verse 22, if you want to read that. Now, when the days of her, Mary's, okay, of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were completed, 33 days after the birth, basically, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, okay? And they have to redeem him. There's a ceremony called in Hebrew Pidyon Ben, redeeming the firstborns. So if it's the firstborn son, and you didn't have a female girl before that, or if you didn't have a miscarriage before that, or if you're a club member, meaning if you're a daughter of a priest, you don't have to pay the tax, okay? But otherwise, you have to pay this tax, okay, for the firstborn child. I remind you, God killed the firstborns of the Egyptians, saved the firstborns of Israel. Therefore, all the firstborns belong to God. You have to redeem them. We have the story of Samuel, for example, Prophet Samuel. Here, his mother decided to dedicate him to the temple. She didn't have to do that, but she decided to dedicate him to the temple if he will be born, and that's what she did. So basically, all the firstborns belongs to God. They conserve in the temple this way or the other. I mean, theoretically, but most people, of course, choose to raise their kids and they redeem them. How much it costs? Something like $150 today. I'm talking about 5 pieces of silver. Someone did the math. Okay, I didn't do the math, but someone did the math. It's about $150 worth of silver today. So we have the circumcision, then the redeeming the firstborn son. Jesus is being redeemed in the temple. Now, I showed it in the last time, and I just want you to really experience the details of it. So let me just open one picture. I'm going to share my screen. There you go. So now you're supposed to see a model. Oops, no, let's continue. Let me just do it again. It's very tricky, this whole thing. and second try. Where is it? Okay, this is open. There you go. Now you'll see it. Okay, very good. So this is the second temple. So Jesus is now about a month old, and he was taken to the temple. Joseph and Mary, coming from the Galilee, probably, entered from Jericho they went up to the Mount of Olives. From the Mount of Olives, they entered from the eastern gates, the Gate of Mercy, it's called, or the Golden Gate, entered to the temple area, and then they came over here. This is not the Golden Gate, what I'm showing you now. It's a different gate, actually. The Golden Gate is not this one. They entered from here to this court over here. Then Joseph and Mary climbed these stairs, entered through Nicanor Gate. That's what you see here. And then a priest, someone like this guy, greeted them, asked them, "Hi, how are you?" "We're fine. I'm Joseph. This is Mary. This is our firstborn son." "Oh, beautiful. What's his name?" "His name is Jesus." "Beautiful baby Jesus." And "Do you want to redeem him?" That's what he asked her. How do we know the details of this whole ceremony? Because Jews do this ceremony until this very day. So my father-in-law, which is, as I said, is a Kohen, he works in finance, but he has this ceremonial role, and he does this ceremony every now and then. Instead of taking the worth of silver to himself, of course, he donates it, he gives it to charity. So that's how it was done. Okay, so if you can't afford this worth of silver, you can also bring 2 doves. And I don't know if Mary gave 2 doves or not. I think it doesn't specify that, actually. But that's, again, the first time Jesus was presented in the temple. The second one, again, from the Gospel by Luke, he's coming for his bar mitzvah. Jesus is coming for his bar mitzvah when he's 12. I'm reading still from Gospel by Luke, chapter number 2, verse 42. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. So that's the first time he was there. That's why I said this little guy over here could be Jesus, just over here. Okay, so he's there, and everyone marveled his wisdom. I remind you that Joseph and Mary left him in Jerusalem. They started walking back to Nazareth, forgot him in the temple, and halfway to Nazareth, they realized they don't have Jesus with them. They went back to Jerusalem, looked for him in the temple, and then they saw him probably with the Sanhedrin. They probably found him with the rabbis over there, and everyone, marveled his wisdom. So his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously." That's one of the proofs that Mary was Jewish, by the way. She was anxious. And then it says, and he said to them, this is Jesus speaking now, "Why is it that you sought me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Okay, so this is young Jesus understand that he has a mission, and he is there. So this is his second time. Okay, I'll take a question. Where was the Sanhedrin located? I will show you. Okay, just remind me if I don't say that, but I will show you. I'm going to take you up on a 360 degrees video just in a moment. After that, Jesus is visiting the temple multiple times, and one of the times that he is visiting is in the Feast of Dedication. In the Feast of Dedication, it's mentioned in the Gospel by John, chapter 10, verse 22. Now it was the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah, that's Hanukkah basically, in Jerusalem, and it was winter, okay? And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch, okay? That's the one thing that I want to add, and now I can finally take you up to the Temple Mount with my videos. So get ready. Now we have all the information we need to see that. So if you had a chance to be there, you might remember this. Okay, let's see. Okay, check it out. This is the bridge, the Mughrabi Bridge. That's the entrance to the Temple Mount. Okay, there you go. That's the bridge. The Western Wall Plaza is here to our left. You can see the people are taking pictures. Okay, just over here. That's the Western Wall Plaza. So we are entering now to the Temple Mount. Here we are. These are the Israeli policemen. That's the gate right over here. And finally, we can see some of the buildings, important buildings here. Take a look at this. What you see here, let me just, here, a bit more balanced, I hope. Anyway, what you see here is Al-Aqsa Mosque. Yeah, this is a better angle. Okay, this is Al-Aqsa Mosque right over here, the third holiest mosque in the world. After Mecca and Medina, it has enough room for 5,000 people. Ramadan is coming up, and I don't know with coronavirus what is going to be the regulation. I assume they won't really open the mosque because of the danger. But basically, it has enough room for 5,000 people. And there's an underground mosque for another 5,000 people. So even in a rainy day, 10,000 people could pray here very easily and comfortably. Let's see another angle of Al-Aqsa Mosque. And now I want to talk about what I just mentioned, Solomon's Porch. This is the location of Solomon's Porch. That's why I'm showing it to you here. Okay, Al-Aqsa Mosque is situated in the royal Stua, like Herod called it, or Solomon's Porch. It was right here. It was the biggest basilica in the Roman world at that time. So I'm talking about, do the math, about 500 feet long and about 120 feet tall. Gigantic, massive basilica in the southern part of the Temple Mount. Now the thing is, when King Herod built the plaza, he built it so big that he did not, he built it so big that not only Jews were able to enter the temple area, also non-Jews were able to walk over there. Now, according to the Jewish law, non-Jews and Jews that are in a state of impurity are not allowed to step into the temple's sacred area, which is situated from more or less where this tree onwards. So from this tree, let me, you know what, I'll get a bit closer and then you understand what I'm talking about. There you go. Now you can see the Golden Dome. So more or less from this line of trees over here, if you're Jewish but you're not pure, you are not allowed to walk in towards the temple. Also, if you're not Jewish, you're not allowed to walk from here on. How do we know? The rabbis describe us a little fence with Greek inscriptions that says, if you're not Jewish, don't enter. We actually found 3 of those signs in the archaeology. Plus, it explains another important story that happens on the Temple Mount. Where you see Solomon's Porch, again, now it's the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but the Royal Stua or Solomon's Porch, this is where the money changers used to be. The money changers that Jesus turned the tables of the money changers and the vendors in the temple, this is where it happened, okay? So we actually have a very good understanding of how the story happened. So it had to be over here. I'm very convinced. Now, okay, so according to the Jewish law, there was no problem for the vendors and the money changers to be here. But Jesus was upset. He was upset because he said, okay, but you are on the same level like the temple. The temple is over here, and you're practically on the same level. So that's why he was so upset. Jesus also knew something that we know today. We didn't know that until about 40 years ago. Jesus also knew about another market, another marketplace. And he probably wanted to tell these vendors and money changers, look, there's another market downstairs. You don't have to be here. You can go to the other market. Let me show you this market. We actually excavated it in the last 40 years. Here it is. There you go. Here it is. It's called Davidson Center. And you can actually see the shops. You see that? You can actually see the shops over there. There you go. So this is where the money changers and the vendors should be. Believe it or not, in one of these shops, we actually found a stash of coins from different parts of the Roman world and the Sassanid Empire. So we actually know there were money changers over there. Plus, we have found in one of those shops, pieces of pottery with the word that we learned earlier in Hebrew, korban, sacrifice. So it was like a voucher that the pilgrims that came to Jerusalem, let's say from Damascus or from Alexandria, instead of carrying the poor lamb all the way from where they live, or instead of carrying money to buy the lamb in Jerusalem, they would just buy it from an agent in Alexandria or in Damascus, let's say. Then they would come to Jerusalem after they carried, a worthless piece of pottery that says korban in Hebrew. No robber would take their little piece of pottery. They would give this voucher to the agent over here, and then they would climb up to the temple to bring offerings. So that's how detailed how detailed the history is now for us. It's not just from the Roman writings, the Roman historian writings. It's not just from the rabbinic literature. It's also from the archaeology. We can actually see the location. So we can see that Jesus' criticism of the vendors and the money changers was really in place when you think about it. Okay, great. Let's continue with, I'll continue with another video now. Just 1 second. I want to take you up now to the actual surface of the Temple Mount. There you go. Okay, great. Here we are. So you can see this is the location of the temple. The place of the altar used to be more or less over here. You can see my mouse, I believe. That's where the altar used to be. Again, I remind you, built originally by Adam, later by Noah, later by Abraham, later by David, and this is the altar of the first and the second temple. The place where they used to slay the animals was usually taking place over here, more or less. We know all these places because we have the measures in the rabbinic teachings. We have all the measures of how far things were from the foundation stone, so we can really describe where these places are. I think it was Terry, one of you asked me, where was the place where the Sanhedrin used to be? You see the trees over here? This is where the Sanhedrin used to be, this area. It's called the Gazit Chamber. That's where it used to be. So this is where Jesus, when he was 12 years old, this is where he was teaching, in this area over here, okay? So we can actually tell all of that. Okay, let's continue. Okay, we're almost, we're about to finish actually, and then if there are any more questions, I'll be happy to hear it. Let me just get to this video. Here we are. Okay, great. So this is the Temple Mount. The temple stood here, the altar. These are the stairs that I showed you earlier in this model. This is the location of the stairs, not the actual stairs, but the location of the stairs where the children of Israel used to climb over here, give their offerings more or less over here. You can imagine Joseph and Mary stepping up these stairs, standing more or less here, waiting for the priest to come to them, ask them all these questions, then they would redeem their son. Again, the Sanhedrin, the Gazit Chamber where the rabbis used to teach was more or less over here in this area, okay? So we have the priests and the Levites standing over here. The common people would stand over here. That's their location. And the Levites used to sing in this area and standing on the stairs. So you can imagine how impressive that was for Jesus and other Jews that came from more from the periphery of Israel, farmers or carpenters, simple people. They would come to the Temple Mount, and all of a sudden there is like a full attack on their senses, okay? They hear music, they taste the sacrifices, they eat some of the sacrifices, they see these amazing buildings and the priests dressed up in white and blue. You can imagine how impressive the high priest used to be. There's a lot of touching, kissing, hugging, meeting other people, other Judeans at first, and then later the Jews from different parts of the country and neighboring countries and empires. So all in all, it was an amazing experience for these guys back then to be in the temple. Very, very different. Okay, I'm turning around, and you'll have to believe me that this hill over here, this is the Mount of Olives, just over here. Okay, this is the Mount of Olives, and I have to say something about the Golden Gate. When Jesus is coming from the Galilee, he had to walk from the Jordan Valley to Jericho, from Jericho up to the Mount of Olives, this area, and then there was some kind of a bridge from the Mount of Olives towards the temple, meaning the entrance was here in this area. Why is that so important? It's important because of a tradition from the Old Testament called the red heifer. The red heifer, this brown cow that they used to slay on the Mount of Olives in order to atone, to cover the impurity from death. Because of that, the gate had to be here. Why? Because the Jewish law says that there was a straight line from the Mount of Olives, where they used to burn the red heifer, to the gate, to the temple. Okay, it had to be over here. So historically, we can assume that Jesus entered to Jerusalem from this area. Now, if you go there, there is no gate over there. I want to show you where the gate is situated today. So let's walk a little bit. I'm walking a bit away from the mountain. From the Temple Mount, from where the temple used to be, and this is the gate. This is the Gate of Mercy, or the Golden Gate. So the line that I mentioned earlier is about 100 meters this way, so let's say 300 feet this way, somewhere between the trees. But this is the actual gate that we have in the last probably 1,500 years, okay? So that's how it looked like. It's a sealed gate. No one can, there's like a little chamber inside, but from outside you cannot enter from here. It's a sealed gate, and there's like a whole legend that when the Messiah will come again, or for the first time according to the Jews, the second time according to Christians, this gate will be open again. For the last 800 years it's sealed, but when the Messiah will come, it will happen from either here or from the other location over here. So last week I tried to cover the last week of Jesus' life in Jerusalem. This time I kind of wanted to give you the Old and New Testament traditions to the Temple Mount. Let me just shut this one. Old and New Testament traditions of the Temple Mount. What was Jesus' business in the temple? And we pretty much covered all of it. I just remind you, just to connect for those who haven't been, Jesus' criticism towards the temple basically says this is beyond repair. The temple is corrupt, the priests are corrupt, and over the years, all the traditions that are associated with the temple moved to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. For example, the Golgotha, the Calvary, where Jesus was crucified, commemorating the Jewish tradition that Adam is buried under the foundation stone. So the early church moved this tradition to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, saying this is where the skull, Golgotha, skull of Adam is situated now. And based on that, all the other traditions basically moved to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this is, we have the first Mount Moriah over here, and then we have the second Mount Moriah in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The traditions are similar. Theologically speaking, it's the same place, but geographically, it's a few hundreds of meters away from each other. Let's take some questions. There you go. So the Sanhedrin I answered. Could people enter from both the south gate and the east gate to do the sacrifice? Yes. I mean, you can come from all directions, basically. There were about 10 gates to the temple sacred area. It's preferable to enter from the Nicanor gate that I mentioned earlier. That's all. The stairs that I showed you, that's preferable. Are any of the broken columns from the Second Temple? I asked a few archaeologists about it. None of them was able to confirm it. Some suggested that some of these columns are from Roman times or late Roman times, so probably not from the 1st century or the 1st century BC. But we do have few gigantic capitals over there. So some suggested that these are from the Royal Stua or the Porch of Solomon. Okay. About the sifting project, maybe you heard of it. The Muslims in the late 90s, early 2000s, they carved, sorry, they didn't carve, they dug 400 loads of trucks from the Temple Mount and threw it in a dumpster somewhere because they wanted to open the underground mosque that I mentioned earlier. This happened about 20 years ago. This is a treasure, probably the most valuable dirt and sediments for every archaeologist in the world. The sediments from the Temple Mount, a place that was never really dug properly. So they threw that again in order to open this underground mosque. And in the last 20 years, the archaeologists in Israel sifting through these sediments, and they actually found enough pottery from the first temple, the second temple. They found seals from the first temple. They found jewelry from the second temple period. They found tiles from how the floor used to look like. So today, based on all kinds of mathematic algorithms, they can actually tell us how the floor used to look like. Okay, so that's what I want to say. What is the Little Western Wall? The Little Western Wall is in the Muslim Quarter. It's not too important for us. The picture that I show you right now, against the shops, you can see the Western Wall on the other side. So the Western Wall is a pretty massive, long wall. It's about 500 meters, 1,500 feet long. So most of it is covered by Islamic buildings built in the last, let's say, 700 years. And the little wall that you mentioned, the Little Western Wall that you mentioned, is a little alley between a few Islamic buildings that was never really built and covered with Islamic buildings. So that's how you can actually see part of the Western Wall in the Muslim Quarter. Very nice. Okay. Okay, so we will have some kind of a mailing list, guys, if you enjoyed it. I didn't finish. I just want to conclude with what I started. Just going back over here. I want to show you back to the Western Wall for just 1 second, put it in the background. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, the first temple was destroyed, the second temple was destroyed. Then there was the second Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, as a punishment, I'm talking about the Caesar called Hadrian. One of the punishments to Judea after this second revolt was to change the name of Judea from the province of Judea to the province of Palestine. So this starts 1,800 years ago, a little more than 1,800 years ago. Caesar Hadrian basically took an unprecedented step in oppressing this revolt. He basically said, he asked his consulates, who were the worst enemies of the Jews, like historically, from their point of view? Oh, the Philistines, Goliath and others. So they said, okay, I'm going to name the province of Judea after these Philistines. That's where the name Palestine came to pass, okay? So for the last 1,800 years or so, it's known as the province of Palestine. In most Islamic periods, actually, it's not named really Palestine. It has other names, but anyway, the name Palestine was always somewhere here. So since 1967, we have sovereignty over the old city, and we have full control over the Temple Mount again. So this was an unbelievable moment in the Jewish history, and I want to show you a picture right over here that will maybe amaze Elisa too. So check this one. I'm sharing now this picture over here. Here, take a look. So what you see here is my Moroccan family when they came in the early 60s. This is my mother right over here. And Elisa, this is your neighbor, my uncle Yechiel. That's your neighbor right over here. This is my grandfather, another uncle, another uncle, another uncle. My grandmother is over here. And again, this is my mother, just over here in the front. So for centuries and centuries, Jews once they were expelled from Judea, the temple is destroyed. I told you about this Holocaust in the days of the Romans. For 1800 years, Jews were basically scattered in 100 different countries of origin. My father is from Yemen, my mother is from Morocco, and in 1948, the Independence Day, the Independence War, and then the Independence Day that is coming up in a week. This happened. Jews gathered from all the diaspora after a very long exile. So they came to Israel. They established a country, and in 1967, about 6 years after my family came, Israel took over Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. So now we have again control over this holy site that is supposed to be a place of worship for all mankind. I remind you the words of Isaiah, "My house will be a house of prayer for all nations." And I really hope that definitely in the hard days of coronavirus, everyone will remember that this is a house of prayer for all nations, and we'll pray thinking about this unique place. So I tried to close this loop. I started with my beard, ended with my family, and my family is just one story out of many other Jewish families in Israel. But that's what I want to share with you, basically, the long history of the Jews and the Temple Mount in these very unique days between Passover and the Jewish Pentecost, in between the Memorial Days for the Holocaust, the Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers, and the Independence Day. So this is the unique time that we're in. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not going anywhere like the last time. We're down to 43 viewers and listeners. So you're more than welcome to write to me, and I'm reading now. So thank you, a lot of thank yous. Great.